I'm going to share a story about a brave young girl named Joanne. Young Joanne did not know what her grandmother and the other adults in Selma, Alabama were so upset about. Joanne had already learned about freedom in school. She knew that in 1863, 102 years ago, Abraham Lincoln had freed all the slaves. So why was her grandmother going over to Brown Chapel day after day for meetings about a fight for freedom? At the Methodist chapel, songs were sung and plans were made. There was even a training, as if for a war. People were pushed and insulted on purpose so they could practice not pushing or talking back. This puzzled Joanne too. It seemed strange that her grandmother's freedom fight involved keeping calm, acting peaceful, and not fighting back. One day, Grandma took Joanne to Selma's downtown to get a new pair of shoes. Joanne saw a pair she liked and tried them on. They were a little bit too big, so her grandmother asked for a smaller size, but the store clerk said no. The clerk demanded that Grandma buy the pair that didn't fit. They had to, she said, because no white person would ever buy them now that Joanne's feet had been in them. They walked by Carter's drugstore. Through the window, Joanne could see the clean, shiny lunch counter, where children her age were being treated to ice cream served by a waitress. She desperately wanted to sit there too. "When we get our freedom," her grandmother said. That's when Joanne understood. The adults were fighting for freedom to sit at that counter, to enjoy a nice ice cream on a hot day, to try on shoes without being embarrassed. Soon, Joanne became a freedom fighter too, marching for black voting rights. In February 1965, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came to Selma to lead the demonstrators in a peaceful march. When the police began to hit and arrest people, Joanne was one of the children taken to jail for several days. Surrounding Joanne in jail were familiar people, young and old, many from the George Washington Carver housing project where she lived. She had known they could be arrested. What might come next? Another step toward freedom. Joanne marched again on March 7th, with several hundred people planning to walk more than 50 miles to Alabama's capital city, Montgomery. But police would not let the marchers over the bridge out of Selma. Attacked by police with weapons, some riding on horses, the marchers scattered. Joanne heard screaming all around her. The next thing she knew, she awoke in a car with her head on her sister's lap. She felt tears drip onto her. She realized it was not tears, but blood from a wound on her sister's head. History remembers that march as Bloody Sunday. The next march to Montgomery, 2 weeks later, ended with a rousing speech by Dr. King at the state capitol. Joanne was part of that march too. Joanne Bland still lives in Selma today. As times have changed, she has always found new ways to be a freedom fighter. In 1993, she co-founded the National Voting Rights Museum, where anyone could come learn about the events that happened in Selma, why the march happened, what it accomplished, and what remains to be done. Now retired from the museum, she guides educational tours along the very streets where she lived the fight for freedom in 1965.